Hello again. I said I wasn't going to do another one of these, but I lied. I lied to you. I'm on a roll and I can't decide what film to watch anyway. So I'm going to talk about books. I called this show Game Changers. So these are the books that, like, I read them and it was like all my previous thinking was blown apart. It was like, no, that's now reversed me. It's like a U-turn in my understanding. So I kind of eclectic bunch of books that some of the authors I know, some of the authors I have no contact with at all, but variety of subjects, all to do with World War II. So here we go. Books that changed my thinking. Again, doesn't necessarily mean that they're my favorite books. A couple of these books I've only read once and maybe haven't gone back to reading a second time, but they profoundly changed the way I thought about things, and that's important. So the first one, and you know me, I'm an ETO guy. I'm a European Theatre Operations guy. And I honestly can't remember how I heard about this book. I mentioned the previous show, Shattered Sword, the untold story of the Battle of Midway by Jonathan Parshall and Anthony Tully. Now, confessions time. For a long time, really, as a teenager, my only knowledge of the Battle of Midway was the Charlton Heston Henry Fonda film. It wasn't a theatre I had read much about, but I kind of knew the basics. I'd read about it in some naval campaigns, and you get those ideas of the Japanese aircraft. They put the bombs on when they should have had torpedoes, and the timing, and the Catalinas going out looking for the fleet, and this kind of thing. And Shattered Sword, what I like about it is it's myth busting, but it brings up where the myths came from. And in this case, in the case of the Battle of Midway, it's basically one guy. It's Fushida, the Japanese commander, the flight commanders, who basically was the one who, after war, most other Japanese hadn't survived the war, or if they had, they didn't write their memoirs. Yamamoto was dead, and this, that, and the other. And so Fushida just kind of told his version of the battle that kind of dropped other people in the blame and kind of made him get it off. And this is the only Japanese version that the Allies, the American authors, used for years and years and years. And all the construction of the film and all the construction of other books is kind of based on this one account. And what these two authors do is they examine this account and basically says it was nonsense. The guy was making it all up. Well, he was there, but he rewrote history to suit his own agenda. And the chapters, it's not just the narrative, it's how structured a book is. And so there's a whole chapter towards the end about where these myths came from, and that understanding of why we thought what we thought. And it goes through the events of June the 4th, 1942. It's a big one. You can see it's quite a tome there. And I don't think I've read it a second time. I'll be honest. I think I read it that one time, and it was quite a read. It took me a couple of weeks, and I had to kind of stop every now and then, look things up and maps and stuff, because my frame of reference isn't as good about Midway as it is, again, the ETO. So I found it a bit tricky to read because it was containing information that I didn't have in my head, if you know what I mean. So I had to do that checking. But at the end of it, it changed my thinking. And so now when I saw the new version of Midway, having read this, I realized I understood that battle better. And the modern film, in some ways, is better than the old film. But Shattered Sword is my first game changer in terms of books. I don't remember, actually, interestingly, I don't know that the writing style was its best bit. It wasn't. The language was a bit technical at times. They're more analysts than they are storytellers, if that makes sense. So, and that's maybe why I haven't read it a second time. But the point is, this is game-changing books, not necessarily the best written books. And again, it's all about how well but it changed my understanding of the Battle of Midway. So if you're interested in the Pacific Campaign, you're interested in the Battle of Midway, if you've seen the film, Shattered Sword, absolutely comes with my heartiest recommendation as a book you will enjoy. So that's number one. I live in Normandy. I live in France. I've been here 20 years. My partner's French. Mag, my two stepdaughters are French. And over the years, I've prided myself on trying to convey the French experience to my tour clients, as well as the Allied experience. So the suffering, the civilian loss of life, the reconstruction after war, the economic impact of World War II, all those type of areas there. And a lot of British, American, Canadian authors, Normandy, the Belgium, Normandy, Netherlands, it's an arena in which the war took place. And they don't always pay much attention to that impact on those who were there, the people who had to pick up the pieces, the liberated, not the liberators, who had to endure an occupation and had to endure the violence of the invasion, the violence of the war. And this next book, called Beyond the Beach, the Allied War against France. See the title? It's not for France. It's against France, by Stephen Allen Bourque. I don't know Stephen. I can't. I think try to find an email address, and I wanted to invite him on the show. It's not that old. It was 2000. When was it come out? 2015. So it's 6 years old. And he's a historian. And it's really that the French had to pay a really high price for the liberation that came. And interesting that it is that photo of Saint-Lô on the cover there that Mag talked about in the Conflict on Camera series about the two boys. If you haven't seen that show, go and look in the playlist, look for Conflict on Camera, look the show for Mag that Mag did, who's in the other room. I think she's actually watching it. I think she's watching on YouTube now. And those two little boys there, their father had been shot as a resistant in Normandy. They didn't know that when that photo was taken in Saint-Lô. That story isn't in the book, I don't think, but it's used to illustrate the destruction of France. And it's one of those books. It's quite an uncomfortable read, I'll be honest. As I squirmed a bit in my seat reading it, because you realized reading it that this liberation we gave the French came with all this baggage of destruction and economic despair. And we talk about the fact that 70% of all the apple orchards in Normandy were destroyed in World War II. So that part of agriculture was lost. And I'm not saying the French weren't grateful for the liberation. I'm not saying they didn't want the Allies to come and the French, of course, were part of the Allies on D-Day. I'm not saying they didn't want to be liberated. Of course they did. I'm just saying that there's this cost. And the way the title is the war against France, it's saying that it's actually the invasion was destructive. But don't be thinking that it's not. What am I trying to say? It still praises what the Allies did. It's not one of those kind of modern revisionists where it's trying to bash us and say that we were evil. It's not doing that. It's not saying that the French would have been better off under the Germans or anything like that at all. It's not like that at all. It's just inviting you, the reader, to be a bit more objective and look about what that liberation actually meant and what the result is. And I'm thinking, as I'm telling you this, I'm realizing I've never mentioned this book to Mag, and she's probably in there thinking, why hasn't he talked about that? I'd like to read that. But yeah, you would. You'd really appreciate this, Mag, because it articulates many of the things you say to me about what it's like as a French person living in Normandy and what happened and after liberation. It talks about the bombing, and so that is, it's an awkward read. And again, so I might not read it a second time, but it's an important read, and it changed my thinking a little bit. I mean, I'd already tried to embrace this idea that the destruction of French property and civilian life was important, but this kind of reinforced what I knew. So it didn't change direction. But Beyond the Beach, the Allied War Against France by Stephen Allen Bourque is definitely on my list. And leading from that, I have a similar subject but slightly different. France, The Dark Years, 1940 to 1944 by Julian Jackson. A lot has been written about the French in World War II. by the French, by other nations as well. And Julian Jackson, if I'm remembering correctly, had been a correspondent or something living in Paris for a long time. So he was a Francophile. He understood France. And if I remember correctly, when this came out because it's in English, I don't think it's available in French. I think there's a big stink about it amongst French historians that it was a bit, near the mark. What it does is it examines, and I think objectively, just exactly what happened to France in those times. The occupation, Vichy France, the free, supposedly free France, resistance, collaboration, the rafle, the roundup of the Jews that were sent away, the Pétain, de Gaulle, all those things there. And initially, when I found that book, I can't remember how I heard about it, but I think I was not interested in the sense that I think the French should be writing these kind of books. I thought, well, this is a Brit. He wouldn't really know this story, but he does, and he is objective and he is fair, and he just takes you through. Well, it's in the title there, the dark years, and it's. If I don't know whether people like Roman, my friend Roman is watching this, who's French, or Karine, watch this. If you haven't, I know there isn't a French version, but you both read English. Read it, and you might disagree with some of the findings, you two. Mag, you might disagree with some of the things it said, but you can't fault his reasons for raising these questions and asking these tough questions. He doesn't. It talks about the bravery of France. It talks about the bravery of the resistance, but it's a warts and all portrayal. It looks at everything in France. It looks at the negatives as well as the positives. It's again, I said, the point of this show is it's game changers. If you want, I mentioned in the last show my indispensable books about Alan Allport's book about the British. This it's not a companion book to that, because that's Alan Allport's book it's not light-hearted, but it's different style of book. It's dark. It's dark. It talks about the deals and the politics and all that. But if you want to understand what the French went through, if you want to understand the complexity, because we get it on tours, we get people say, you'll just be pulling in and you've got like 2 minutes before you get to the next stop, and they'll say, so just explain how Vichy France worked. And you go, yeah, no, can't do that in 2 minutes. It's too complicated, and I've learned a long time ago living here that my British view of things is maybe different understanding to the French view of things, like de Gaulle and Pétain, for example, okay, who this book talk about a lot. Now, in my mind, and some of my French friends will say, no, you're wrong, Paul, de Gaulle isn't the complete hero some of the French think he is, because he could be a bit of a dick, in a Monty kind of way. He wasn't the easiest to engage with. Look at Eisenhower's memoirs about dealing with de Gaulle. Churchill found de Gaulle a bit difficult to deal with. I understand completely why he's a figurehead for the French, because he wanted to fight back, and he was a nobody at the beginning of the war. He's a nobody. He's a cavalry officer, yeah. But he's a general. He's basically the most important person in France. But he was a bit of a dick at times. So he's not quite the complete hero in my eyes, as some French people put him. And likewise, similarly, a lot of people I know French despise Marshal Pétain, the First World War hero of Verdun, who was the president who, in some people's views, sold his country down the river in 1940. And his grave was unmarked for a long time, and people hate him, and people still spit when they say Marshal Pétain's name. Now, I understand he's not a hero in World War II. I'm not saying but to me, he kind of falls in that Neville Chamberlain category of someone who, misguided though he was, I think his motivations were genuine and sincere. He got it wrong because he trusted Hitler, and that we now know Stalin found out, who, by the way, hold that thought because Stalin comes up later on. He got it wrong. Don't do a deal with Hitler. The guy's going to renege on it. But I don't know that Pétain can be blamed completely for thinking what what happened later on. And by the way, the book Appeasing Hitler by Tim Bouverie about the events of 1940 is a brilliant read as well. I might mention that at some other point later on. So I've gone off on a tangent, but France, the Dark Years goes all through that. The Pétain de Gaulle. So yeah, my feeling is Pétain's not quite as bad as some people think he is, and de Gaulle's not quite as good. They're a bit closer together on the line than some of my French friends would think, who have they're more at the extremes. The French, to me, they're a bit closer. I think Pétain, is misunderstood a bit, but yeah, all of that is in here. Now, okay, it's his opinion. So when he talks about Pétain, that's what he thinks about Pétain. But there's lots of archives of accounts of what so-and-so said, what Prime Minister this said, what General so-and-so said, what French people said about it. It's heavy on the sources of this French person said this in 1942. It's not just his opinions. It's based on accounts that he's translated. So France, the Dark Years. Next book. You may know I'm a bit of a Great Escape fan because I did a Great Escape week. What was that? 2 weeks ago now. And I read Paul Brickhill's Great Escape book when I was like 8 or 9. And I met Guy Walters, who wrote The Real Great Escape, for the first time at Chalk Valley History Festival in 2019. And I got, and I knew his book. Well, you've probably seen the show. Go back and check the show where he came on, talked about the hunt for the Nazi murderers. He, in a nutshell, thinks that, The Great Escape actually in some ways did more harm than good and didn't damage the German war effort much. And in fact, so when he signed that to me, he said, I'll find it here. He said, because I said about the fact I wasn't sure I wanted to read his book because it was so challenging. He says, for Paul, I really hope this doesn't, spoil it too much for you, the story. But it was a game changer. It changed the way I looked at The Great Escape from Sadler 3. And Axel, each time I do one of these shows, the first two I did, the list of books I mentioned are all in the YouTube description. I haven't gone back and done the indispensable books yet, but all the lists will be there under each video. And maybe I'll put the complete list on a book review page somewhere. But yeah, so if you think you know about The Great Escape, read this because it'll change your mind. But it's not scathing. It's not anti-history. Guy's a good guy, and he just invites you, the reader, to look at things from a different point of view. And it's all backed up with data. It's all backed up with the archives. It's refreshing. It's a refreshing look at The Great Escape, and it sits there with my other Great Escape books, and I like them all. But this is the one that changed the way I thought about those events, and that's again the purpose of this show is game changer books. Which brings me to my next one, which is The Final Solution, The Fate of the Jews, 1933 to 1949, by David Cesarani. He died a couple of years ago. He's quite young, in his 60s, I believe. I bought this at the Holocaust Center in Paris 3 years ago. And I bought it because it was on sale, actually. I did. And I thought I'd read about the Holocaust, but what I realized is I'd read bits and pieces about the Holocaust. I had not read the complete story. And, books like Schindler's List were important. And I mentioned in my veterans memoir show about the book on Sobibor by Thomas Blatt. That was a good book. But this takes you through, as it says there, just exactly how the Third Reich, the Nazis, just little by little went about destroying a race of people. And, it starts with licenses for radios and which school are you going to, and it builds it through. It's really, it's not a book you're going to be able to speed through because I had to read it in stages. I did a couple of nights in a row reading it, then put it away for a week and read about something else because it's pretty dark, it's pretty heavy, and you kind of, your reaction is more death, more horror, more injustice, which of course is going to be key to reading about the Holocaust, but it's very unrelenting, the misery in the book. And even the design of it, kind of dark clouds there. It does take you up to the formation of Israel, hence the fact it goes to 48, 49. So there's a kind of, not a happy ending, but there's a slightly brighter future heralded at the end of the movie book, but not movie book. But yeah, I don't like to use the word definitive, maybe, but as far as what I've read, it's the definitive book about the Holocaust. If you want it in one volume, there are definitive books, I'm sure, about Auschwitz or Sobibor or certain Nazis who developed certain things, but this is a kind of a one size fits all kind of general history. But yeah, dark reading. It's not easy to read. You'll read it and you'll get angry about what the Third Reich did. You'll get angry at the situation, angry at the law changes and the submissiveness of certain people and how the Germans didn't see it. Ordinary Germans didn't see this coming. But so it's a tough read, but brilliant good. And it game changed. It really didn't, not so much game changers. It rounded off what I little bits of what I knew about the Holocaust. It put it together in one place. Okay, that's what it did. So it changed how I thought about the Holocaust because it put it all together. And yeah, so when I see those memes that say, those ones that go around saying, "Oh, it all started because they had to hand their weapons in," you go, "No, you're simplifying this whole dastardly procedure that took a long time to develop by very clever." And it was all with the backing of the law. That's the horror of it. Of every step that they took was all within the law. They changed the law there, tweaked the law there, and these poor people in Germany did not realize they are supporting, willingly, in some cases unwillingly, the very regime that's going to kill them. It's just heartbreaking, but profoundly moving and important. So the final solution is my next game changer, which ties in quite well to this book about Stalin, The Court of the Red Tsar by Simon Sebag Montefiore. And he's written several books about Soviet Union. And it condensed the whole Stalin regime and how he, in a similar way to Hitler, created that horrible evil circle. And it was one of those books that you put down and you go, wow, that's it. Whoa, changed my thinking, changed how I thought about things, put into perspective the whole, not just, it does talk a bit about the battles. You do get a little bit about Leningrad and Stalingrad and Kursk and stuff, but really it's about the court. It's about the people that Stalin has around him, similar in his respect to that Holocaust book, but different. It's the whole story. But it is a game changer. It's a book that your understanding of the Russian regime, the Soviet regime, will change after reading it. And actually, probably of these books here, I've got one of the best written books. The Holocaust one, the Final Solution one, is a well-written book. But he's a wonderful use of language in Simon's writing. So it's just, despite the grim nature of this topic, it's a pleasure to read. The language, the phrasing is beautiful. Great writer. That's a game changer. And the second of the two books that I mentioned in the previous show about giving a game changer, I don't think David OKeefe is watching this time. So this is David OKeefe's book, and again the green screen plays in effect. One Day in August, about the Dieppe raid, and there's a couple of shows I did with David. Just search among the playlists, Canadian history about David OKeefe. So I've said this story before on the shows. So David and me got talking. He first did stuff with me about Operation Spring, so the Verrières Ridge, his other book, The Black Watch Snipers in Normandy. Then we talked about doing Dieppe, and the Dieppe, David's Dieppe theory, if you don't know, is that it was a raid to go and get Enigma information for the Allies. And if you haven't read it or you haven't seen my shows, you're thinking, that's not what Dieppe is about. And that's exactly what I thought when I found out about the bar. I thought, no, Dieppe isn't to do with that. That's nonsense. That's conspiracy. That's just a new crazy idea. No, Dieppe is to appease Stalin. It's to do this. It's practice run. All those things that I thought I knew. And David said, no, I've spent, he's been through 150,000 pages of documents investigating this, and I got the book, which I think David sent me. I can't remember now. His publisher sent me. I can't remember. Did I? Yeah, I think he did. And I was a hard sell. I sat there reading it with my arms folded, like, yeah, no, I'm not going to believe this Enigma bullshit. I'm not going to believe it. And I was dismissive of his theory, even a quarter of the way into the book, even a third of the way into the book, because he starts, as all good historians do, at the beginning of the story. So he builds up the importance of naval intelligence, the importance of the Atlantic war, bombing strategies, naval, blah, blah, blah. So before you get anywhere near Dieppe, it's all this background stuff. And then I forget exactly which chapter I was in, but there's a point when the penny dropped for me, and I realized, or I believed, that what David has said, I believed that it was about Enigma. And Ben Main, who's been chosen, I know Ben and you know Ben. Ben has read the first version of David O'Keefe's book, which was a shorter version, but not, I don't think, he may have since read it. And Ben is me a year ago. He's still in the, no, it's nothing to do with it. Maybe Enigma was a sideshow, but it wasn't about Enigma. But David's argument is that it was about Enigma and everything else was a sideshow. That's David's theory. So you haven't read his book. Whatever you think Dieppe was about, read it. And you still may not be convinced, but I was convinced. I now am in the camp of believing that Dieppe was about getting Enigma information. And some of you may be thinking, well, that makes no, you're wrong, Paul. Well, maybe. Have you read the book? If you haven't read the book, read the book and then see if you still think the same thing. This author, this historian, this TV YouTuber was convinced by David's story. I may be wrong, but based on how David outlines the story there, I believe him until someone says, you've now got to prove David wrong now. As Scott said there, David makes a convincing argument. I think it's now, you've got to prove David wrong. Now is the position I'm in now. And if you've got to make a really good case to dismiss all the documentary evidence he's now uncovered, or what Red Rider was doing in Fleming's and the narrative that he builds up, you've now got to prove that wrong to dismiss it. So yeah, that's absolutely a game changer. Absolutely a game changer. No question about it. And the last one, and then I really, really am this time going to stop because I really am. And I've got to put all these books back on the shelves, which is take half an hour in its own time. Again, I don't mean to just talk about people I've had on my shows. I didn't necessarily intend to do that, but it just has ended up being that. So, yes, this is about the Dieppe raid being cover for stealing Enigma. That's it. Basically, that's it. Read it. So tell me what you think. Foxtrot Romeo. So the last book, Canadian again. So Tim Cook came on my show, and it's about the fight for history, or it's called The Fight for History. It's about Canada's 75 years of forgetting, remembering, and remaking Canada's Second World War. I've always been a fan, that's a weird word, talk about a country in a war. I've always been a fan of the Canadians in the Battle of Normandy. I like their story. I like the fact you put, no, I'm not going to do another show tonight. No, I'm not. They landed in one beach, moved in one direction. It's been a good story. But there are parts of the Canadian story as a nation that I didn't really fully understand. The introduction of a new flag, the way it worked with their Canada's Jews, Canada's different races and backgrounds and colors, and how their memorials worked, and their grave system and their museum system. And Tim Cook, who's just a brilliant writer, along with the three best written books, David O'Keefe, Tim Cook, and Simon's book on Stalin, the three best, I'm trying to hold them all up. They are the three best written books. All of them are game changer. They are best We did Shattered Sword at the beginning, Craig. That was at the beginning of the show. You got to go back to get that. That was book number 1, I think, or book number 2. We did that. So Tim Cook, his book on Canada, just outstandingly good, about memorialization. It talks about the trial of Kurt Meyer after war, corrected lots of things I thought I knew that I now realize I was wrong on. And a lovely guy as well, really nice to talk to. We talked about the book on the show, so that's the next game changer. I haven't read, you mentioned it earlier, this First Team series by Lundstrom. I haven't read those books, so yes, I can't comment on them. That you've put me onto them. I'll have to look them up and find out what they are. As I said, these are the books that changed my thinking. They're books that changed your thinking, and I will have to look at them at some point. So, and by the way, I haven't touched the First World War. I don't do much First World War. There's lots of writing about that war that, you know, that they dismiss the lions led by donkeys kind of stuff. I don't read much First World War stuff, so I'm not going to talk about that. Since World War II. So they are, folks, my game changers, the books that, you know, absolutely changed the way I thought about things. They're all good. The book about France, the France Dark Years, is an excellent book. And yeah, and I don't know whether when people set out to write these books, they set out to write books that change people's perceptions. I guess David did. I don't know if that's the case or not. But the point is, in my case, they have changed my thinking, and that's important. Sometimes you read a book and it just reinforces what you already think, and you go, "That's good," and it's comforting. And we've talked about in historiography shows that I think, although people say they want new history, a lot of people actually want comfortable history. They want the same history they think they know already. They want the warm cardigan, the old comfy slippers of history, and actually that being challenged by something is quite new. Look at R.G. Poulson's work about James Gavin at Nijmegen. I'm not going to fall into the trap of talking about that endlessly because I just don't want to. But that look at something about the Battle of Arnhem that we thought we knew, and we look at it from a different point. I like those investigations that change the way we think about things, and because by definition, all history should be revisionist in the sense it should say something new. Otherwise, what's the point? If it just regurgitates what someone else has said, there's no point, is there? It's got to be new. It's got to be refreshing. So there we are. I'm going to stop now because I'm just rambling now. And viewing numbers are plummeting. The last couple of minutes, they're plummeting. But people will find this later on. And I guess I will add the descriptions and titles of these books to the YouTube description at some point when I get time. But I really am going to go and do something else now and finish my beer. So again, I can't believe some of you have actually come and watched all of these shows. Again, I don't know what else you have to do today and why you're doing this, but yeah, that I thought you'd find interesting, and I'll do another show at some point in the next few days. But I won't be doing 5 on the in the same day again, just too much. But there again, please though, do give me your feedback on if you've read some of these books. Tell me what you thought of them. That I welcome that opinion of what you think, and if you disagree with me, I think that was an atrocious book, Paul, then tell me. All I'm saying is these are the books that changed how I thought about things, and that's important because I read a lot of books for my shows now, and some are brilliant, some are good, some are okay, most are good, but it has to be quite exceptional to kind of go, wow, that changed my thinking. So I actually, when I look around my shelves, there aren't that many books that I would say are game changers. Lots of really good books, but game changers quite rare. So there we are. Cheers, everybody. I'm going to go finish my beer. Thanks for watching. I'll see you all next time. It's Paul Woodadge for World War II TV. Don't forget to check us out on Patreon. Don't forget to check out our social media profiles and check out some of these books. And if you do buy a book by the books, if you can use the bookstore link in the description below, because that means you get the book, but I make a little bit of commission. It helps me keep this channel afloat and earn a few pennies to to buy more books, I suppose, in a odd way. But there we go. So there we are. Thanks very much, folks. See you. Have a good evening.